My name doesn't really matter. What matters is that this started a couple of weeks ago, and I'm pretty sure it still hasn't ended. I don't live in the deep woods, but my house is right on the edge of a quiet, nature-filled suburb. Lots of trees, wildlife, and that one side of our house that borders a patch of woods. It's not big enough to be called a forest, more like a dense strip of trees. From the back of our property to the road on the other side, it's only about a quarter of a mile. That road curves around and connects to another street, and on the other side of that road, there's a massive body of water. Growing up, I always assumed it was a reservoir. There are tons of no trespassing and government property signs posted along the fence. The fence is at least 10 feet high, topped with barbed wire. No obvious entrances, no holes, no gates you can just walk through. But here's what always bothered me. The name of the reservoir doesn't show up on Google Maps. It doesn't show up on Apple Maps. It doesn't show up anywhere. I've searched more times than I can count. Nothing. No official name, no record, just a big fenced-off lake that no one is allowed to go near. My siblings and I used to talk about it all the time, make up theories. Maybe it was some kind of old military site. Maybe there was something in the water. Maybe the government was hiding something. I always laughed it off. I'm on varsity cross country, so I care more about the loop than the mystery. That wooded area is my go-to route. Exactly a 2-mile loop, through the woods, along that quiet road by the water, then back around toward home. It's way better than my actual neighborhood, where the roads twist, there are no sidewalks, and people drive like they're trying to set lap records. One of those days, right before our season kicked off, I went on my usual run. It was late afternoon. The woods looked normal. Shadows between trees, small animals, nothing unusual. Except for one thing. On my way back through the woods, I heard something behind me. Not twigs randomly snapping from the wind. It felt like something matching my rhythm. I'd slow down, the sound would fade. I'd speed up, it would come again. I kept telling myself it was a deer, or maybe another runner I just hadn't noticed. But deep down, I felt it. That weird pressure, like eyes on your back. I finished the loop, shook it off, and went home. That night, I left my bedroom window open like I always do in the summer. I love the night sounds, the crickets, the trees moving, and especially the rain when it comes. And that night, the rain definitely came. A storm rolled in fast. Thunder cracked above the house. Rain hammered the roof like gravel being dumped from the sky. It was loud but soothing, the kind of noise that pulls you straight into sleep. I was drifting, almost gone, and then I heard something that didn't belong to the storm. Soft, muffled, wet, crying. At first, I thought it was just my brain making patterns out of the rain. I tried to ignore it, but it didn't fade. It got clearer, and it wasn't distant. It was right below my bedroom window. Someone was outside. The crying was quiet, but it had this raw, broken quality to it. I held my breath and listened. Then I heard a voice. A woman's voice. "Can you help me?" she said. "I'm cold." The words cut through the sound of rain like they were whispered directly into my room. I don't know what instinct took over, but I moved before fear had the chance to paralyze me. I jumped out of bed, ran out my room, down the stairs, and out the front door. The moment I stepped outside, the storm swallowed me. Rain hit my face so hard it almost stung. I sprinted around the side of the house toward my window, and there she was. A woman, crouched right under my window, trying to stay under the tiny overhang. She was wearing some kind of white clothing. It looked like a nightgown or a thin dress. Her long hair was plastered to her face and neck, dripping with rain. Her feet were bare, pressed into the muddy ground. I slowed down as I approached, trying not to startle her. "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" I asked. She didn't answer. She didn't even react first. Then her head slowly turned toward me. Her face looked pale, like she hadn't seen sunlight in months. Her lips were slightly blue. Her eyes were what scared me. They weren't just afraid. They were empty. Like something had hollowed her out from the inside. And then, without warning, she shot up from the ground and charged straight at me. She moved so fast I barely had time to brace. I threw my arms up expecting impact, expecting her to slam into me, scratch me, grab me, something. But halfway to me, she paused. It was just a fraction of a second, but it felt longer. Her eyes flicked up and down like she was sizing me up. I'm tall, and maybe that made her hesitate? I don't know. I just know that her expression changed for a moment. That empty, broken look twisted into something else, something more aware. Then, instead of crashing into me, she turned sharply and sprinted away, straight toward the woods.
I watched her run and felt chills go up my spine. She wasn't stumbling. She wasn't struggling. She was fast. Too fast for someone barefoot in the mud in the middle of a storm. She disappeared into the darkness between the trees, and I didn't follow. Every part of me screamed at me to go back inside. I did. I slammed the door behind me and ran to my dad's room. He woke up groggy and pissed off until he saw my face and realized I was serious. I told him everything in a rush. The voice, the woman, the way she ran. His expression shifted from annoyance to alarm real fast. We checked every door, every window, making sure everything was locked. We both stood there in the living room afterward, tense and unsure. We talked about calling the police, but what were they supposed to do? It was after midnight, in a thunderstorm. By the time they arrived, she'd be long gone, if she wasn't already. It felt pointless. We told ourselves we'd deal with it in the morning if we had to. I eventually went back to my room and closed the window this time. The storm still raged outside, but it wasn't calming anymore. Every crack of thunder sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind sounded like crying. Somehow, I fell asleep. The next day passed normally. So did the day after that. My dad and I came up with simple, logical explanations. Maybe she was a homeless woman, soaked and desperate. Maybe she was mentally ill, wandering through the storm. Maybe she'd already found help or moved on. That would have been easy to believe if things had ended there. They didn't. A week later, I went for another run. I told myself not to think about it, just focus on my pace, my breathing, the route. The woods felt normal again. The road by the water was quiet, like always. But as I ran up beside the fence that borders the reservoir, I glanced through it, and my legs just stopped. Down by the water's edge, sitting on a rock, with her feet in the water, was a woman in white. Her. She was facing the lake, her back partially toward me. Her legs dangled just above the surface. The water was unnaturally still around her, like the rain from that night had never existed here. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then she turned her head, slowly, and looked directly at me. Even from that distance, I knew it was the same woman. That blank, wrong stare, that too wide smile that didn't reach her eyes. She stood up. For a moment, I thought she'd jump into the water again. Instead, she ran straight at the fence. Her face hit the chain link and pressed into it like she wanted to push through. Her fingers curled around the metal, knuckles pale, and she just stood there, staring at me with that same twisted smile. I shouted that I was calling the police. No reaction. "I'm calling 911!" I yelled again. This time, she moved. She stepped back from the fence, and then, without breaking eye contact, she turned and dove into the water. Not like a normal person. There was no hesitation, no flinch from the cold, just a smooth, unnatural motion like the water was where she belonged. She vanished beneath the surface. I fumbled with my phone and dialed 911, trying to explain there's a woman inside a restricted reservoir area. She just jumped into the water. You have to send someone. I tried to keep my eyes on the ripples, tried to find even a hint of her head breaking the surface. But nothing appeared. The water went flat, calm, wrongly calm. By the time the police arrived, she was gone. They took my statement, looked around, shined a few flashlights, asked a few skeptical questions. They said they'd investigate the area. They told me to go home, lock my doors, and call again if anything else happened. They left. I wished that was the end. It wasn't. I stopped running for a while. Whenever I even thought about that loop, I could feel the image of her face against the fence. That smile burned into my mind. At night, I started sleeping with the window closed and the blinds shut. It helped a little, but not enough. A few nights later, I heard something outside my bedroom window. Not crying this time, just movement. A faint shuffling, something brushing against the wall, the sound of weight slowly pressing into the siding and then moving away. I stared at the blinds, heart pounding, afraid to lift them. The sounds went away after a while. The next morning, I checked outside. Right beneath my window, in the damp earth, were footprints. Small, bare, deep, leading away from the house, toward the woods. I told my dad again. He tried to calm me down, said maybe it was kids messing around, maybe someone cutting through our yard at night. He was worried, I could see that, but he wasn't there for the crying, for the voice, for the way she ran. Days passed. I pretended to focus on school, training, my life. But at the back of my mind was the same question. How did she get to that reservoir in the first place? There's no way in. My sister and I spent hours looking along the fence years ago, trying to find a gap or a hole. Nothing. The fence might as well have been a wall. Yet she was there, inside. And when I saw her, she reacted like she recognized me, like she'd been waiting. My cousin Nick is a conspiracy theorist. When I told him the story, he immediately jumped to the idea that the reservoir isn't really a reservoir, that the government is hiding something in there, that she's part of some experiment or cover-up. It sounds ridiculous. At least it did at first. But the more nights I spend listening to those faint, scraping noises outside my window, the less ridiculous any explanation sounds. Because last night, it got worse. I woke up sometime after midnight. No storm this time, just silence. The kind of silence that weighs on your ears. Then I heard it. Breathing. Right on the other side of the glass. Slow. Wet. Labored. Like someone who'd spent too long underwater and still hadn't caught their breath. I stayed completely still, my eyes locked on the ceiling, afraid to move, afraid to look. The breathing got just a little louder, closer. And then I heard her voice again. Not from the yard, from the window, right against the glass. "Can you help me?" she whispered. "I'm still cold." My skin crawled. Every hair on my body stood on end. My chest felt tight, like something invisible was pressing down on it. I didn't get up. I couldn't. I just lay there and waited. Eventually the breathing faded. The house went quiet again. I don't know how long I stayed awake after that. I only know that when I finally forced myself to get up and look, The first hint of dawn was already creeping into the sky. I pulled up the blinds with shaking hands. There was nothing outside. But on the glass, right at face level, there was a handprint. Small, wet, perfect. Like someone had pressed their damp palm against the window and slowly slid it down. I don't know who she is. I don't know how she got into that restricted reservoir area. I don't know how she moves so fast. I just know one thing. The first night, she was below my window. The next time, she was behind a fence. And now, she's right at the glass. She keeps asking me for help. And every time I hear her voice, it sounds less like a plea and more like a promise. She's still cold, and she's not going to stop until I open that window.